I'm Molly Brady. I teach property, land use, and local government law at Harvard Law School. And I use a technique that is very common across the university, which is think, pair, share, giving students a problem to go through in groups with people sitting around them, talk about it, and then I call on the groups to share what they think about the problem so that we can hopefully learn from each other. The concept that I'll show you a bit about today is the takings clause, which I teach in property. It's the part of the Constitution that requires that when property is taken for public use, just compensation has to be required. And the problem that I was discovering was that students had prior year's notes from upperclassmen friends, or else they were familiar with the real cases. So some came in with kind of a lead on the answers to the problems. Here were the problems that I had used in the past. Both of these were generated from real cases. So I just sort of changed some facts. Regenerating year to year can be taxing. So I thought I will try to use this technology to help me get some inspiration for new problems. I'll show you now the prompt that I used. So I told it who I was, and then I actually copied and pasted the two problems that I've used in the past, told the model which cases we read in the class, so which source material the students will be drawing on, and asked it to draft new problems and be detailed in the facts it includes. It generated two new problems, one on riverfront property, a common takings clause fact pattern, and also one on solar panels, which I thought was very interesting. I asked it to make problems harder and add more specific facts. And also I asked it, I didn't like that the problems themselves explicitly mentioned case names. I wanted the students to have to think about which case applied. So I asked to omit those names, and it went on and followed those instructions and tried to add a little detail, make things harder. I went on to ask it to test a different case that wasn't tested in the two problems it generated. And the problems it ultimately came up with were not the ones you see here, which I've generated for this session, but it was these problems. And I really liked these. I should say also that I asked the model to be as creative as possible, to hallucinate as much as possible, to try to come up with some really different fact patterns. The ones that came up with in the earlier session for me were involving student housing, so a great topical thing for first years to learn about or think about. Access to public restrooms and whether that could ever trigger a compensation requirement if a regulation required it, and then a sort of mesh up between elevator regulation and solar energy regulation. And so I gave these to the students in a handout and then asked them to work together on them, and then called on them for discussion of the problems and how they applied the cases. And we had a great time. For one thing, I do think that that making it creative helped me come up with really interesting fact patterns here. And so I appreciated that opportunity. I think also I did have to tweak the problems to sort of make them perfect or fit exactly what we cover in class. And so as we learn about the limitations of generative AI, I don't think you can expect it to do perfectly, but it can sort of get you 80% of the way there with new inspiration and then your own typical pedagogical tricks to generate new problems. So I will definitely do this year after year in my different courses as I try to get inspiration for in-class work.